Hi, welcome to Noise Violation Podcast. Today, our guest is a morning anchor for Fox 7 News Austin. She is a Latina journalist and yogi instructor, founder of the News Yogi. Welcome, Leslie Rangel. Is it Rangel or Rangel?
It's funny. I get a lot of questions about that. I pronounce it Rangel. It should be Rangel. But I always say, I pronounce it the way my dad taught me how to pronounce it. And I get a lot of questions on it, especially in the Latino community, because they say, it should be Rangel. You should say Rangel, stay with the Spanish. And I 100% am on board with that. However, I just still remember my dad always saying, he sat me down in kindergarten and said, it's Rangel. So I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe one day I'll change it back to Rangel, but for now it's Rangel.
it gets Americanized for
Yeah.
sure. They
Yeah.
they can't roll the G, Rangel.
Yeah.
So give us a background about yourself, like how you got started. Did you go to school? Your journey to where you got to be a morning anchor.
Yeah, so it's been quite a journey. I first delved into I guess on camera anything in high school. And I remember I was in a Spanish class. I was very shy. When I was younger, I dealt with obesity, just kind of fitting into the statistic of what happens in minority communities who are low income. So I was just always generally very shy. And this was freshman year of high school. And I was sitting in a Spanish class with a teacher named Miss 40, Rachel 40. I think now she lives in the Round Rock area. We connected once, but never went through that connection, got busy. But she said, Leslie, you have such a good speaking voice. You should try out for our school news, Hawkeye News. And I was mortified that she even called on me. I was like, no, I'm a flower in the back of the class. Like, nah, just let
Yeah,
me be. And so she said, no, really, you should do it. We need more Latinas in news and on TV and in the media. And I just was like, okay, thanks, Miss 40. So I went about the rest of that day. And I remember it was towards the end of the week because I knew the weekend was coming up. And I didn't really think much of it until that Friday. And that Friday, I don't know, something in me said, she's right. So I asked my mom if she could drive me to the audition. And luckily, it was like right around the corner from where we lived.
and this is high school.
Yeah, this was high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so went to the audition and found out that I was going to get to be the next crime reporter. And so that was, I guess it would have been maybe going into my sophomore year. I don't remember exactly on the timing, but I do remember, I was the crime reporter for Hawkeye News, and I was doing stories about locker room safety and how to keep, your money safe, because they were having issues with, kids coming into lockers and taking things, high school stuff.
Yeah.
So from there, it kind of progressed, and I never really looked back. I just continued on to college. In college, I did have somewhat of I don't want to do this anymore. I felt a
Mm-hmm.
calling to go into like the nutrition wellness space. But my mom basically said, no, you're basically halfway through this career. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she was paying for it. We really didn't have the luxury for me to switch and stay an extra few years. So I was bummed, but I continued. And ultimately, I'm glad that I did, because when I think it just goes to show that when you love something and it's your passion, it never really goes away. Because now I'm still in the wellness space, but I'm still in journalism, and I'm passionate about both.
Right. So did you graduate with a journalist major?
Yeah. This was in 2012, University of Texas here in Austin. So I've always stayed in the South, Southern region. And I graduated with 2 degrees. I graduated with Bachelor's of Arts in Spanish language teaching because I thought if journalism ever doesn't work out, then I'm going to teach. And I guess that was probably a nod to my Spanish teacher. And then the other degree was Bachelor of Arts in broadcast journalism. And this was when they still had that degree, broadcast journalism. And I remember because we were really excited because the next year is when they opened up the Moody Center of Communication. And now the school's completely different. They got beautiful new facilities, which I'm happy for them. But, we were kind of the last ones before that was brought on board. But I remember on everyone's class ring in my little cohort, we were excited because our ring was going to say BJ. And we just, college kids, we thought that was just the most hilarious thing ever. And so, yeah.
And so is there something, like one thing that you remember learning that you still is one of the best things that you learned back then that you're using today in what you do?
That's a great question. I've been, I think it'd be remiss to not talk about what's happening right now in our world, with race and racism and everything that a lot of people might be just learning about, a lot of people that are exhausted and saying, where have you been? A lot of people that, just it runs the spectrum. And I'm really sad that I don't remember his name, but it was a professor at the University of Texas at Austin, and it was a class dedicated to learning about minorities and the portrayal of them in media. And this class to me, it opened my eyes and rocked my world because, I am not Black, but I am brown and I'm first generation Mexican American. I can say that my mom and I, when we've been out in situations, even at Lululemon, we've been followed around, and you can tell it's these kind of little microaggressions that happen, like people looking over, making sure we're not like stuffing things into our bags. And, if I were to show up somewhere looking like this versus how I look on air, it's 2 totally different reactions that I get.
Mm-hmm.
So in this class, I learned that this is a real thing. This is not just me wondering, like, did that just really happen? No, that couldn't have happened. No, people are generally nice. And so in this class, we learned about all of the stereotypes that have happened, throughout the history of TV and media,
Right.
from the mammy figure of Black women and, even in advertising, Aunt Jemima on the syrup, the sombreros in Mexican food, just all sorts of cultural appropriation. And I remember that professor saying to, it was a huge class. It was one of those classes where it's like, the whole auditorium and like, I don't know, 300 students in there. But he said, for those of you that are going out into this world of media and into this world of journalism and whatever, wherever you're going into this space, I just want you to remember this. There are Black doctors out there. There are brown attorneys. There are people of color. There are Asians, and, everybody can be your expert on things. So his challenge to us was, as we continued on in our careers, that we would make sure to find people who didn't always look like you. A lot of times, especially right now, even, I've gotten messages like, I'm seeing all these Black people on TV. Where have they been? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Where have they been? Why, why, we obviously know why now, but I think that's the biggest thing that I have learned and taken with me through my career, because I can confidently say, in my daily journalism work. And it's tough. I mean, right now, my workflow is a little bit different because I am a morning anchor, but I've been there. I've done you come into the newsroom at 9 o'clock in the morning. Your story changes 3 or 4 times throughout the day because somebody wasn't available for an interview, or you got this great story and then something crazy happens right before news time. So then that's totally like out of the picture, and then you have to run over to something else. And so, it's tough in terms of that workflow, but I've always made it a point. If I was interviewing an expert on race or an expert on law, or heck, even an expert on like cooking or something, I always make it a point to find people out there who may not be represented in this whole bubble that, people want to call the media. So
Yeah,
that's been
that's awesome. And is that decision your decision as the anchor? Like, you get to choose which story you want to cover, or is there like a list of stories you have to pick from, or somebody gives you one? How do
yeah.
those stories get chosen?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. So in terms of, for example, our morning newscast, we look at what's happening like that day. What are important stories that are happening that day? And then we also look at, okay, how is this affecting the community? And from there we move on. And we have producers. So our morning show right now is from 4:30 to 10 o'clock. So that would be a beast of a show, I guess, if you want to call it, compared to other news stations who, they're usually maybe 4:30 to 7. And then that's when the national, like, the Today Show, Good Morning America, they come in
Right.
and take over, but we stay local the whole time. So we've got a huge show. We've got 5 producers. And in that, we have all the stories. And when I come in, chances are that the shows up to a certain time are already written. But even if for example, I came across, one of my producers came across some information about the LGBTQ for Black Lives rally that was happening Friday night. And so that wasn't in the 4:30 newscast because maybe when the producer came in didn't see that, or for whatever reason it didn't come up on her radar. So then
Mm-hmm.
the second producer said, hey, I think you might have missed this. Oh yeah, that's going to be a big story, and we know a lot of people are interested. It's affecting our community. We need to have that in. And so then, we put it in. And then as information is coming in is how we're able to build into the newscast. Now, that's a little bit different from me being a reporter. As a reporter, excuse me, when I'm telling stories, I absolutely have the freedom to pitch a story that I think is relevant to the community. And I think that also highlights the importance of having diverse newsrooms, because, racism and that conversation aside, I have a whole different viewpoint of the world than you do, than my co-anchors do, than other journalists and other newsrooms do. And I think it's important to have diversity, because what I think is a good story may not be what you think is a good story, and vice versa. And so when I'm pitching those stories, I pitch them to my news managers. And my news managers right now are very, I love my news managers. They're open. They let me tell basically whatever stories I want, of course, within reason, and making sure that it's a story that is going to be balanced and fair. My type of stories that I'm telling now are a little bit different than when I was working as a crime reporter, maybe at a different station, or covering politics in Oklahoma. And so, the workflows, again, are different. In those settings, you have an editorial meeting, you talk about, okay, if we're talking about this issue, who are we going to interview to make sure that we're getting both sides of the issue to tell the story in a fair and balanced way. So, that answers the question.
Oh yeah, that was great. That was great. And you're talking.
Sorry, my dog's Hero. I have pugs.
I saw the pug life picture.
Yes, yes.
I
All
used
of
to have
them.
a pug as well.
Yeah, this is one of them. He's Hero.
Hey, hero.
His little protector. All right.
And so, I mean, people have all these biases, whether it's their political beliefs or anything along those lines, and
Mhm.
they like to get those confirmed to, say, hey, look, it's on the news, I'm right. And so, I think the perception is that a lot of these news stations are, lean one way or the other.
Mhm.
But how does it in your news station? Do you feel like, you're more conservative because you're Fox as opposed to like CNN's more liberal? I
Right.
guess what do you think about just those lines and how that's perceived?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really valid question. And I wish more people would maybe ask that and dig a little bit into it. So, um, the media in 2020, the media, it's huge because now you don't have, it's not like, I mean, even me growing up, in the 90s, in early 2000s, that, you kind of knew what CNN was, but you really didn't. And there was only your local stations. And now with cable news, I mean, there's so many news outlets. There's an outlet that's dedicated to only business news. Then there's only news. Then there's only, news that is kind of catered for a younger generation, and that's only TV. Then you add your bloggers, then you add the podcast, then you add the Twitter micro news covering. Then and I could just go on and on and on and on. And so the way it works is we are owned by Fox, but all of our editorial decisions are made in house. Like, we are local journalists, and that's what it is for our affiliate, and that's what it is for the other affiliates in town. Is I Fox 7 is local journalists. They are journalists who live in this community and who know what's happening in our community, and who try to cover our community in the best way they can. Do I, as a person of color, think that we should cover more people of color? Yes. But I think that goes for every single news outlet in the country. Um, and I think a lot of people see that now because you see what's going on.
Mm.
Um, but I think there should be that distinction of what local journalism is and what the national journalism is. And even, I know that these national media outlets have gotten a lot of pushback. Even, we'll take politics and race out of it for a moment. I worked in Oklahoma, and we, as a journalist who was on the ground living in Oklahoma and seeing some of my friends, being scared because their home was going to get ripped away by a tornado. These are the stories we were covering day in and day in and day out on the ground. And the national media would then come in, and they would tell the story from the small lens that they're seeing it in. Whereas I or my colleagues would be telling the story from day one through, we've seen the whole gamut. And so it's basically telling the story from whatever perception in time that you have seen. And I think that might help bring a little bit more understanding to, local journalism versus national journalism. I think both are essential, both are important, because, if we didn't have national journalism, we wouldn't know what happened in Minneapolis, and we wouldn't understand maybe why a group of people wanted to do the same thing here in Austin. And so you can use national journalism to really, I guess, understand what the nation is facing as a whole. But I think it's essential that people tune into local journalism, whether it's us, if you don't like us, that's fine. Watch a different local news station. Or if you don't watch TV, that's fine too. We have apps. And, there's newspapers, there's so many things. And I think it's just so important that, as a society, whatever issue you feel strongly about, it's important to know what's happening with it in your local community. So.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that, local is if you want to make change, start locally first. So really know what's going on in your community and educating yourself. Who are your elected leaders or elected officials, and, see what they're doing. And if you don't like it, then start there.
Right.
Is a great way. But continue kind of on the biased line is like, when you're getting hired, is any of that, are you asked any of your beliefs when you're getting hired? Is it more credentials? Like you got a degree and the experience, it's like they're open to anybody.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for 8 years. I've had one, two, three, four. This is my fifth job now in news, and I've never been asked what I believe. That's never been a question that's come up. I've never heard of anybody being asked that question. I think that would be against the law.
Yeah.
But I think managers know, and I'm not sure, I can't speak to that because I'm not a manager, but I will say I have worked with people who, deep inside, you probably know what their beliefs are, but we don't talk about it because we know that our mission out there is to tell the news and whatever viewpoint is. We don't have opinions. We do, they're personal, but as journalists we don't share our opinions because it's not our place. Our place is to give the facts to viewers and people out there, and then people out there can make their informed decisions based off of the information that they're given. Yeah, so I have worked again with people who I know may have had a little bit different beliefs than I have, but again, we just, it's never really been an issue in terms of beliefs. Yeah.
Has 2020 been one of the craziest years to be a news anchor?
I think it's always crazy. I think what has been interesting for me as a person who is brown, and who I feel that I've been doing my best to continue on my professor's challenge to show people who may not always look like me. I think it's been interesting to see a lot of other people now waking up to that same challenge. So.
Yeah, and so as being a woman of color, have you faced a lot of these racial injustices? How much has that played a part in your journey coming up?
Yeah, so I want to make it very clear. I am not Black, and I don't know what it's like to be Black. I have many friends in the industry who are, and I've heard their stories, and sometimes I've seen those injustices, and it's infuriating. Yes, I myself have experienced it, but I in no way want to equate that to what a Black person has felt. So I just wanted to say that first. But as a brown person, yes, I believe I have faced injustices in both in the community and also within newsrooms. And, I read something somewhere that said, systemic racism isn't about hate. It's not that you hate as people. It's that there's just this underlying idea and almost instinctive thing that you see and don't notice, but it's there. I was out at a story with a photographer of mine who is also Hispanic. He's from the Valley. And we were knocking on doors because a police officer had been killed. And it was a horrible story. And, our job is to find people who may have known the officer or seen the officer or maybe saw what happened, to put our piece together, because we are TV and we need interviews. And I remember, knocking on doors and people looking at us like oddly. And this was a predominantly white neighborhood. And then one woman came and she wasn't confrontational or anything, but her comment to us was, "Oh, I thought you guys were the cleaning crew." And I was, it was one of those instances where I was like, did she really say that? And I think that's, that is a perfect example of, why racism doesn't always equal hate, because I don't believe that this woman hated us. I believe this woman saw two people who were brown and automatically assumed that they were less than because of the color of their skin. And so I think that is one way. Another way, I've been in other places, up for jobs, and I have been told you don't have enough experience when my resume, read the experience, or I don't have enough leadership and my resume read the leadership. And I got down on myself like, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I don't have leadership. Maybe I don't have the experience. And then when I see the hires that come in after are younger people who I know have way less experience than I do, and they're white. It's one of those things where you try to push it aside and you say, no, that can't be why. I mean, certainly not. That's not
Right.
why. And then now, these conversations are coming up even right now in 2020, and I'm talking with fellow journalists, and it's like, yeah, that was why. It happened to me too. It's these small little things that you want to believe aren't happening, but they are. And so,
Right. And so it's like they have a story about you in their own head. And then it's like, your worth, but then they tell you something different. And then it actually causes doubt in your own mind. And so it's like pushing people down to fit into this story that they have about, people of color or a certain race. It's terrible to see
yeah,
that 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 narrative or that story keeps getting pushed. And I
right.
think what's going on now is bringing a lot more awareness to what's going on. Just the amount of people that are protesting and walking the streets and getting their voice out there and are being heard is a beautiful thing to see. And then there's also the negative part where other people are taking advantage of the situation and causing harm or pushing more hate when we don't need that. We need to, push equality and love and peacefulness. And so I think it's a tough line to be. It's like, but I'm just trying to bring more recognition and awareness and to realize, because it is ignorance on the people, like you're saying, they don't know. It's like nobody knows what you've gone through or any other person of color. It's a foreign world to someone like me. And
Mhm.
so
Well, I appreciate you for acknowledging that. And I think it starts, with that acknowledgement of knowing that, at the end of the day, nobody chooses, what family they're going to be born into. And you didn't choose to be white, just like I didn't choose to be brown. And I'm sure, we wouldn't change who we are. And so I think beginning to understand why everything that's happening starts with self-awareness and self-understanding. And I think that, as a yogi, even that's what I believe, because I can't understand who I am or I can't understand people around me until I understand myself. And so I think, even more so as a journalist and then also as a yogi, it's just been like,
Yeah, and so I mean, just for my own state of mind and being, it's like I watch the news and I can only take so much of it. It's like I'll watch it and then it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe all this stuff's going on. It's like, and so I have to separate myself from that. And the profession you choose, you're in that every day. You're reading these stories. You have to present these stories to the people. How do you separate yourself from that and keep a clear mind?
yeah, I think, how do I separate myself? I think yoga has helped me a lot with that, in knowing that, um, yes, there is, bad in the world, but there's also good in the world. And there are always, two, not even two, like there's always multiple narratives to one story. And so, in terms of just practical self-care, I too, turn off the news. As soon as I am done, I turn it off. I will say right now, I haven't been able to. I don't know if that's, for personal reasons or professional reasons. I find something that doesn't let me turn off right now. Maybe it's because, we're just in this pivotal moment in history. And as someone who chose a career, to live on the front seat of history, maybe I just innately have this want and need to witness everything that's happening right now. So it is tough. But I encourage people to watch, because I've gotten a lot of messages too, well-meaning people that, I'd consider them friends, and they all of a sudden want to turn into journalists overnight. And, they've been messaging me like, have you seen this? Did you see this? Have you seen this? And, I see their intention. But one day I wasn't rude, but I did say, yeah, we've been covering that story for a while now. Have you checked out fox7austin.com? You know, one of our reporters Shannon Ryan, she's been covering the story all along. and so, their response is, oh, I didn't realize. And so many times, even when I'm doing interviews with people, they say, oh, I don't watch the news. It's just so sad. And I think that just goes to show is people haven't been watching. People have been choosing to turn off. And when you ignore something for so long, it's just a matter of time before it blows up. And I think that's kind of what's happened is, there's been so much silence and looking the other way for so long that, it took something, heartbreaking, to happen to really, open people's eyes.
Yeah, and you touched on it there, that ordinary people think that they're all reporters now, and so if they see something going on the street, then everyone busts out their cell phone to videotape it and post it. What do you think of that? Is that good? Is that bad? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know that I have an opinion on it. I think I am in a profession that is always looking for the truth and is always looking for transparency. And if you want to bust out your cell phone and record something, that is absolutely your right. I mean, I say do it. If something compels you one way or another, you know, whether it's something awful that is happening or just a girl who is selling bracelets on her front lawn because she wants to raise money for a cause that she believes in, like, please, and, you know, send it to us, and we'd love to, you know, share whatever that story is. I think even right now, you know, we've been talking so much about what's happening right now, but you know, COVID-19 has also been huge. And if it weren't for people out there sharing their stories and picking up their phones and recording what they were seeing, I don't know how we would have gotten through a lot of our newscasts, because you know, we couldn't leave. I'm still working from home now. So Monday I'll be here set up in my kitchen. But if it wasn't for, you know, I told the story of a teacher who was walking along and was seeing all of the, you know, just suffering that was happening. And she decided to, you know, just start feeding healthcare workers. And she would take her phone and film all the healthcare workers and as they were handing out pizzas and food and everything. And if it wasn't for her having taken it upon herself to document this on her cell phone, it would have just been an interview of her face. And she had so many great photos and great moments that I didn't even use her face. I just used her voice and some of the pictures that were there. And so I thought that was really cool.
That's awesome. So you video edit and produce all your own or some stuff, or?
Yeah, some of it. That is, I know how to do it all. When I have the luxury of working with a photographer, when I'm back at the station, I use them because a lot of times, you know, their focus is photojournalism and my focus is writing. And so, you know, if I have them available, why not use them? But
Right.
right now I have been writing and editing most of my stories. I've been in a situation where I haven't had to shoot anything yet. I've just been relying on photos and videos that people send me. So.
Right. And you have a very tough job. I think it's extremely hard. Just to, like we're talking about, is just to say the truth and not to, you know, exaggerate or, you know, fluff anything, because you have President Trump calling the media the enemy of the people right now. And then in some ways it's true, where I've heard a story about during the coronavirus, how like this news crew like lined up cars to make it look a lot more busy than it actually is. And to me, that can cause just more panic for people. It's like, oh my gosh, it is bad. And then there's also like the real truth, where it's like, no, there is actually a line of cars and you do need to take this serious. So it's like people will hear something like that, and then it causes them to doubt really the truth that you're saying. And so I think it's very important to keep that trust with the people, and to know what's good and bad. So what do you think about, you know, I guess I don't really know what the question is, besides, you know, how do you find that line of, you know, what's truthful and then what's also people are going to pay attention to,
Right.
and grab people's attention?
Yeah, I, as a journalist, I will be making a correction to that. So the incident that you described with COVID-19, there were some reports that I'm not sure if it was CBS National or a CBS affiliate, but nonetheless, journalists who are working under a CBS branch, they were accused of having cars line up during a COVID-19 testing. And that is inaccurate. That did not happen. What happened was a lot of times when we're setting up stories, so right now, if I wanted to set up a story about testing, I would have to go to Austin Public Health and say, hey, Austin Public Health, and work with their PR people, their public relations people, and say, this is the story I want to do. Can you get us an interview with Dr. Escott or somebody else who is an official with Austin Public Health who can give us some more information about the situation. In addition to that PR person, I would also like to get some video to supplement what is happening. This is my deadline and this is what I need. So then the PR person would set up all of these interviews and say, okay, Leslie from Fox 7, here is the interview time. He can talk to you then, and you can go get some video. They know you're coming. Because in journalism, there are laws we have to follow. If it's private property, we have to get permission to be on private property. If it's public property, we have to get permission. For example, if we were going to go get video of the school, we couldn't step on school grounds without having permission from a school district. We can get video of a school from across the street on a public street because that's public. So there are a lot of little things that, go into it. And so in that situation, what happened is the PR person at that time said, and this was confirmed in an article, and through some just need to dispel some of the rumors, the PR person in that case said, for whatever reason, you can come during this time. And perhaps during that time, there was no testing. And so the PR person is the one who then told employees or healthcare officials who were, involved in that situation, said, hey, line up because, the news crew is coming and they need video of this. And so the news crew comes with no knowledge of what's happening. And so, so I think that's what happened in that situation. But that being said, it is absolutely on a journalist's duty to make sure they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's in every situation. And, if that doesn't happen, usually, corrections will be made and conversations will be had in the newsroom about, why or why not something did or did not happen. And a lot of times, if we do a story and maybe the other side isn't available, we usually, say that. We, if someone really likes pugs, but someone doesn't like pugs, and I do a story about someone really liking pugs and all, how they make great dogs. But somebody, I needed to get somebody who's like, yeah, but pugs are lazy and, they just lay around, but they don't want to talk to me on camera. Chances are I'm going to say, this is why pugs are great. Oh, and by the way, we did try reaching out to someone who thought, pugs were lazy, but they didn't return our calls or they weren't available for comment at press time. Now later on, a week later, if the person, if it's such a big story that, the person who didn't like pugs now all of a sudden wants to come forward, then yeah, okay, you don't like pugs, so let's hear your side of the story. And so that's, kind of how it works at the local level.
Yeah. How long have you been doing the news, Yogi?
That project, it's been ongoing for a while. But I just kind of restarted. I didn't know what the news Yogi would ultimately look like. I up until I'd say when I started at Fox 7, because I was transitioning to a crazy morning schedule, I told myself that I would not teach in-person classes for at least 6 months, because I just wanted to get in the groove of what it was like to wake up at midnight and go to bed at 3. So I was teaching 16 classes a week at
Wow.
where I lived before. I lived in Waco before, and I worked as an evening anchor there. So it was completely opposite schedule. So I told myself I'd give myself some time off. And when I was there in Waco, I was the news yogi. I taught yoga to just everyone. And then right when I was ready to, talk to studio owners here and maybe get some opportunities in teaching, then COVID-19 happened. And, it all just shut down. I was like, okay, well, I'll just continue not teaching in person, obviously, because nobody else is. But we'll just see what happens when things start opening back up. And so during those early months, I kept seeing journalists, just talking about being burnt out mentally and not knowing how to deal with everything that's going on. Because a lot of times we aren't allowed, to share our opinions on things because we are journalists. And so just, a lot of people saying, how do you cope with this? How can you sleep? What kinds of things are you doing? And I just saw this need. It was just like, oh my gosh, like it's been in the title all along. I'm the news yogi. Like I can help bring yoga to people in news. Like, what have I been thinking? And I talked with a friend of mine who she's a freelance reporter with CBS Network. And I was like, hey, Deborah, like, what do you think about this? And she said, yeah, start it right now. I was like, are you sure? I was thinking about maybe waiting a month. She said, waiting? Why? And so literally it was maybe a week before, everything that's happening right now really, just exploded. And so it's been interesting. I'm certified. I'm trauma informed certified in yoga, and I am also 500-hour trained yogi. And so it's like it's almost this perfect thing of like, I've had this thing all along. I was trying to figure out, how that was going to come to fruition. Was I going to continue in-person classes? And it's just kind of like I found this little niche because I know what it's like to be a journalist. It's tough. It doesn't, it's hard. It's hard doing our jobs emotionally. Put emotions aside, just stress,
Hmm.
always. I heard a journalism, he's one of the heads of, it's called DART journalism. It's academics. They focus a lot on looking at journalism and trauma and how journalists face trauma. But he said, like, by nature, journalists are stress writers. Like, it's true. It's
Hmm.
what we do. It's how we are, always breaking news, always meeting deadlines. Chances are, if you meet or talk to a journalist, they're a procrastinator. If I know my deadline is, case in point, I knew we were going to talk at 11, and I was like, well, I can get something in at 10. And so literally my watch is telling me like 3 minutes. I'm like, 3 minutes? That's forever in TV talk. So I was like, okay, I can keep going. And then, finally we got to where we are. But we tend to ride this stress bubble. And for some reason or another, we like feed off of it. But I think that we also need to get off that stress bubble, even just for our health, because anybody who has studied anything in terms of trauma knows that our central nervous system is what helps regulate our bodies and helps regulate cycles of stress, cycles of rest, and even things like digestion and things like that. So if you're always in this high stress situation and you don't give your body that opportunity to rest, that can lead to a whole nother set of problems. So So yeah, so that's kind of how the news yogi began out of this pandemic, and it's growing.
Yeah. So to me, it sounds like, you're talking about what's going on at the moment. So you're doing like a protest hip opener. It's like, oh, we're going to be on our feet all day today. So we got to stretch out the legs so we can march. you know? Yeah. So some creative videos like that, I think it would be fun to watch. It's like
Yeah.
you're getting the news and you're getting a yoga workout at the same time.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that would mix though, because
I don't know. And to be honest, my focus right now is for journalists. I, my mom, she's not a journalist, but she's like, Leslie, I've been watching your videos and that meditation helped me. And I'm like, that's great, Mom. And she shared it with a friend, and that's great too. Maybe as it continues growing, maybe I'll expand it to more general public. I mean, it's not a private page or anything, so anyone can join, but I do cater most of my content towards journalists because, again, it's a tough time to be a journalist, because, a lot of people out there do think we're bad people, and a lot of people out there don't make the distinction of, you know, us just being people who live in your community who just want to tell your story. If you're angry about, I don't know, Zilker Park, something's not happening that you like at Zilker Park, we want to tell that. If you're angry about the traffic, we want to tell that story. We all I got into journalism to really, just help people, and share their stories when they're not getting heard, whether that is a veteran who, you know, got his first house after, being wounded in Afghanistan, uh,
wow.
or if it's in Oklahoma, people who their homes were falling apart because oil companies were fracking and it was causing earthquakes, to someone who just opened up a new restaurant and they want to share their new product. Those are the stories that I want to share.
Yeah, as we're coming to an end, can I get a quick take on what you think's going to happen? Do you think like UT sporting football do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, I think, I don't know. As someone who loves football, I'd be excited to see it come back. We saw the NBA announce they've found a way to do it. We know that UT is actively practicing right now. So I don't know. I have a feeling they'll find a way to do it, in a safe way, because, at the end of the day, we are still, health officials say we're still in a pandemic. So, I guess we'll see what happens. I know they're offering testing to people who, have been around a group of people now in Austin, and Williamson County has already been offering free testing. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe they'll test everyone who goes into DKR. That'd be a massive undertaking, but hey, maybe they'll do it. I don't know.
And have you ever heard about a second wave of COVID? Is that a real thing? Is that
Yeah,
going to
I think
happen?
doctors are saying that it's, I'll just say what Dr. Fauci has been saying. I think a second wave, Dr. Fauci said that a second wave will happen, and it'll be up to, people out there responsibly going about their daily lives. It'll be up to everyone to see if it's going to be a situation where it'll overwhelm hospitals. So I think that's what doctors are saying now. They continue monitoring the numbers. Yeah, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know if there's a second wave coming for sure, but
Have you seen anything about the protests? Has that led to more infections?
I think, from what we've been reporting right now, there is no information. And I think just because it might be too soon, where, this has only been happening a week now. But I do know, again, that Austin Public Health is saying, if you go to their portal, it's austintexas.org. If you Google Austin, Texas, COVID-19, it's the first link that pops up. But there's a self-assessment on there. And if you've been participating in the protests or just been near protests, near a lot of people, there's a self-assessment test that you can do. And it'll tell you, if yes, you should take a test, or no, you shouldn't. And then you set up an appointment, and they're offering free testing. So that's with Austin Public Health. Williamson County, I know, was already offering free testing for people who are asymptomatic. That has been happening maybe now for 2 or 3 weeks. So if you're in Williamson County here in Texas, then that is happening. I haven't heard yet of Hayes County offering testing. I'm not sure if they're doing it or not. I just haven't looked. So.
Okay, as we're coming to an end, Leslie, I just want to thank you and acknowledge you for the work that you do and informing the people and keeping people up to date, and really doing it on a community level for where it matters. And I just want to thank you for all that work and the responsibility that comes with it, and to just appreciate you for that. But I like to end positively. So what's one thing that's positive in your life or that makes you happy right now?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for acknowledging that. I don't, journalists aren't thanked enough. Not saying that, oh, you need to thank me, but it feels good to be recognized for really just being a member of the community, because that's what we are. We love our communities. So yeah, thank you for that. And then something that's positive in my life right now. Among all this, my husband and I, we, made a crazy decision to buy a home. And then this was like a week before everything tanked with COVID-19. And so we weren't sure if we were going to be able to move forward with that. So we are, blessed that can happen for us. So we've always been in apartments and an apartment living, being a journalist and moving from one city to another. So very soon, hopefully, we'll be South Austin residents and check out some good barbecue down there. So
Nice.
yeah.
Well, congratulations. And where's the best place for people to connect with you and find you?
Yeah, so I'm on, if you want more of news, Leslie, I'm Les Rangel on Fox 7. That's on Facebook as well as Instagram and Twitter. So LES, my last name Rangel, Rangel on Fox 7. And if you happen to be a journalist out there, or have friends that are journalists who need a little bit of yoga or just de-stressing or learning how to breathe in high stress situations, you can find me at the News Yogi, and that's on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So
Thanks, Leslie.
yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.